Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters restoration. So this is a very special episode. Folks, check out the green screen. I know, see, this is what happens, but we're going to have a little fun. You can see my friend here, Nick Jones, dressed up for the season. I thought, I grabbed this shirt at the last minute. We saw this. We thought this is cool. So I just want to introduce everybody to my friend, Nick Jones. We've known each other for over 20 plus years. We actually worked together at Borders, and we had a friendship for a very long time. There's been like a 10-year gap in this friendship, but that's on me, by the way, not on him. And so basically, we've reestablished our friendship as a result of doing Mormon book reviews. But lo and behold, I find out my friend Nick is part of a very popular rock and roll podcast called Pod of Thunder that they've been doing for 8 years. Now, a warning to y'all, it is a not safe for work podcast. They do use the swears. I was a special guest on their program recently, and Nick and I did not use the swears, but there was some swears in it. So if you're sensitive to that thing, I do not recommend you watch it. I've done too much of an introduction here. Nick Jones, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. So I went on your program, and Nick and I actually both have a podcast, and we'll probably talk about that at the end of the program. But actually, Nick, this was Nick's idea. He came across a Christmas movie a couple years ago that he found to be very interesting. And as we were conversing, he said, this movie was made by the Mormons. Of course, that's how he would understand it, because my friend Nick is a traditional or conservative Orthodox Catholic, right? Wouldn't you say that?
I sure.
Yeah. So that's his background. Good old Polish Catholic, right?
Yeah. Check all those boxes. I think they all apply.
So we're from a place called Northwest Indiana, just outside Chicago, and we have just about every ethnic group in the world lives in that area. So just about every church you can possibly imagine is based there. So it is a very multicultural melting pot, if you will. And so I come from a different background, and we, for whatever reason, still are friends. And
it's not that hard to imagine.
Yeah. Well, he knew me when I was like hardcore Calvinist, and I can't believe he still kept me as a friend. But either way, that you have a lot of grace there for a Catholic, I'll tell you that. So you came across this interesting movie.
Yes.
And it's called Christmas Snows, Christmas Winds.
Yes. It's only about a half hour. So it's a short, whatever you classify it as. Yeah.
So you brought up to me that this movie was made by Brigham Young University. So Nick, I just want you to talk a little bit about your experience with that film and just some observations you made, and then maybe we can just kind of hash it out.
Sure. Yeah. Before, I don't want to. I guess there will be spoilers. Why not? But before we get, I guess, too far into the actual story of it, the thing that struck me was, or at first, is Steve and I are from Northwest Indiana, and who's our most famous writer to come out of this area?
Gene Shepard.
That would be Mr. Gene Shepard, famous for A Christmas Story, the film. And it struck me that the tone and the look of this short film were very similar to something Gene Shepard would have been involved in. He's not, of course, but that was something that kind of grabbed me right away, because it's Christmas Story and some of the, I think it was made for PBS shows that, like Shepherd in America, I believe he did in the 70s and the 80s. There's a unique tone to those movies and television shows. And this was pretty close. So that grabbed my attention right away, because I was just looking for a playlist on YouTube, just whatever. Somebody made a Christmas playlist. There were like 200 themes, I want to say. Oh, okay, there's probably some stuff in here I've never seen that I may like. So I just happened to click on this one, and I guess we'll get into a little bit more, but enjoyed it. But it had a dark side to it. It had an edge to it that I did not expect.
Yeah, it was interesting. And just so folks know, just to give a little background here, the movie itself is based on a book that was published in 1977 by BYU Press, and it's called Frost in the Orchard by Donald R. Marshall. And then in 1978, the movie was made from one of the short stories that's in this book. And of course, the Christmas Snows, Christmas Winds. That's where the movie gets its title from that short story. And so apparently this movie was probably shot about the time that the book came out. So that's kind of a little interesting perspective there. So, I watched it the other night, and I kind of picked up what you had said about Gene Shepard, of course, of The Christmas Story. And just so you know, folks, he's a very, very influential writer from Northwest Indiana, has a tendency to bash the region, as we call it, the region where we're from, in some of his programs, and also on when he does speaking engagements.
But it butters his bread, however.
Yeah, certainly.
Because he really reaches into the nostalgia and the setting that would have been Hammond, Indiana in the 1930s, I guess.
Exactly. And just so you know, Nick is from Hammond, Indiana, and I actually lived in Hammond for a while I was actually the city sealer for the city of Hammond, which was the head of the Department of Weights and Measures. So we both have an intimate connection to the city of Hammond, which is referred to as Holman, Indiana in the Christmas Story film. But the Holman Avenue, just so you know, is actually the main downtown road in Hammond. Yeah. So that's where they got the name. But and then Gene Shepard, later best known for going on WWOR or WOR radio based in New York, and became a legend out there as well on one of their 50,000 watt AM stations. So yeah, let's get back to why you, like when I watched it, I immediately did catch the aesthetic of the filming, that I thought, yes, this did have even like the close-up shots. So like in the opening scene of the movie, they have the gentleman who's the narrator observing children who are then looking at toys and displays at a department store. Yeah. And so I immediately picked up, is that where you picked it up too?
Yeah, definitely. It looked and felt like the Goldblatt scene in Christmas Story, which it's not referred to as that, but that would have been the actual department store in Hammond at that time. It definitely had that similarity, and it had the guy walking around, reflecting on his childhood, narrating it. Some similarities there, and it predates Christmas Story by 5 years. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it just makes you wonder if this film had any influence on the creators of the Christmas Story.
It's hard to really be able to even speculate on that. I think because obviously the movie came out later, but Gene Shepard had been, technically producing, but he had been involved in the production of short, hour-long PBS specials that had the similar tone. I don't know that they probably did a Christmas one. I don't know. I know that there's a great 4th of July one. There's a great Thanksgiving one, which makes my mother laugh kind of, because the Thanksgiving one, it's the star-crossed loves of Josephine. I forget. But anyway, it takes place. The object of his affection in that is a Polish girl. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but the Polish girl is oh my goodness. And part of it takes place in the basement, the panel room at the church, which if you're a Catholic from Northwest Indiana, particularly, you've been to the panel room, how that's where the pancake breakfasts and the coffee and donuts and Las Vegas night and everything would take place.
Fish fries. And that's where you're doing that devil bingo stuff straight from the pit of hell as we viewed it.
Wow. Well,
it was gambling.
It is gambling.
So, it picks up, and part of why this film kind of would resonate with Nick and I is because it's interesting how the aesthetic is very similar. Now, let's move on a little bit onto kind of like the story. So there is, early on in the story, there is like this foreboding sense that this is a wonderful, nostalgic Christmas story that's very, very nostalgic. You have a smile on your face when you're watching it. They're not your memories, they're somebody else's memories, but they are familiar enough. And
then all of a sudden,
yeah, they have that music going on throughout where it references and foreshadows what something would happen later.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think I got the chord. I just tried to figure it out before we started recording, but it's something where there's a lot of suspense. There's, like you said, foreboding. So it's a jarring sort of an off-putting. Definitely a great juxtaposition to the rest of the look and the sounds and the feels of everything. Yeah.
So as basically the story takes place, is he takes you back to the period of time where he's about 5 years old, 1939, and he's telling about his childhood memories of Christmas. So why don't we just talk a little bit about that, Nick? Just kind of how that look and feel of that, and the opening scene is a classroom shot, which again, totally
Christmas story
all the way, man. So it was a very similar Christmas shot that takes place in the classroom, and then just the leading up to Christmas. Just talk a little bit about that.
Okay. The thing that I remember most of it is when he's talking about his mother preparing the meal, just all the different foods and making wassail and all the candy. He gets very descriptive with the candy. Things I'd never heard of. I think, what was it? Glass candy animals or something like that. I looked that up. I couldn't find anything. I said, is this a real thing? Because I want to know about it. And it had a lot of, you could tell it was a rural area for the most part that it was taking place in. There was some horseback riding and, views of the plains and whatnot. It really good descriptions for the like the sights, sounds, and the smells, because again, back to the food, very much like, keep bringing it back, but much like Gene Shepherd, he was a brilliant storyteller, and I think this does as good a job as Gene Shepherd would with this kind of story. It's shorter, but as far as being able to convey and set an atmosphere, and you can really, even though a lot of these things he's talking about, I didn't experience them as a kid, not necessarily. Everybody's different. Everybody's memories of their youth and their Christmases of their youth are different, but I was able to imagine it. Yeah, I'm watching it, of course, but it was well done, where you can kind of smell the smells of the food that was being prepared. So. Did you feel the same thing?
I actually really enjoyed the way they did film the food scenes, is the preparation of the various pies and items that I remember they made like a fruit punch thing where they where they put they're cooking up the fruits, and I forget
the wassail.
That's the wassail. Okay. Yeah. So it was really interesting, even just seeing that they use the equipment and the old fashioned hand grinders and stuff like that as they're making the food. So it was just kind of laid out a very particular place and time. I felt what I really liked about it too was it seemed authentic. Now in the 1970s, there was very little authenticity when they were doing filming these movies from the past, because everybody had long hair. Like my grandparents hated Little House on the Prairie because that Michael Landon was a hippie with that long hair. And my grandfather lived on the frontier of Canada. Like nobody had hair like that back then.
No.
And so like if you watch Happy Days or even Black Sheep Squadron, everybody has these Farrah Fawcett hairdos, and so for something from the 70s to be filmed, I felt rather authentic, is actually kind of a rare thing from that era.
Yeah, I would agree. And even I'm thinking of when it's a little bit later in the movie when he's, I don't know, I forget exactly what age, but I'll say like he's 11 or 12 toward the end of the movie. The clothing that they had, I can't really describe it, but the clothing and okay, I'm going back to Christmas stories. you know the bully Farkas in A Christmas Story, his little toady friend who had kind of like, what do you call it, the rye hat sort of, and like the jacket, and it's similar to that kind of a look. I don't know, is that what kids wore in the 30s?
I think probably 30s, 40s. That was probably the look. It seemed like they the aesthetic pretty good, especially for that era. I'm sure there's a few things that got through that, like in the era of after watching Mad Men, I'm obsessed with getting the history right because they did big time on that show. So, the basically, so what we have here is a lead up. So we got the food and stuff, but everything is like this countdown towards Christmas and so Christmas Eve and having people over. And then, but before that, you have him waiting for Santa to arrive and just trying to stay awake, but also trying to get to sleep so that he can get up in the morning and open his presents.
And I enjoyed particularly the scene where they're getting prepared and they're getting the tree together.
Oh, yes.
And he is, I believe he's sitting on his father's lap, and they have the same old string of lights that they always use, and they're figuring out which bulb is not working so they can get the whole strand functional and up there on the tree. And just kind of watching that scene, I noticed the actor who's playing him as a child, the way that he's kind of it's something that as an adult, it's very sort of, okay, the lights don't work again this year. Like, oh boy, okay, what am I going to do? But as a kid, it's like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, this is exciting. We're getting these big, huge, bright bulbs. We're trying to figure it out. And it's something that it's, as an adult, it's more of a chore, an inconvenience. Oh, they don't work. But then you can kind of see that as a child, that I'm thinking the actor, either he's a great little actor or he was really, like, as they were filming that, he was really kind of mesmerized by just looking at these giant light bulbs. So that stuck out to me, the way that the child reacted to something so seemingly mundane.
That's interesting. Yeah, I do remember that scene, and that's the thing, is like it does have these nice touches. And when you think about, like, so this would have been filmed probably by primarily like with the LDS, like, or the Brigham Young University, like they have some film school, I guess, or they do actually. And this would have been probably produced primarily by students, and then the cast would have most likely all have been members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We checked the IMDb pages, and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of history there with these people. So this was like a one-off for some of them, or a few other things. So all things considered, when you look at the story and the way it's told, I mean, I was actually impressed with how well the cast was. It was authentic. It was real. It was not. It wasn't bad acting at all.
No, it was short, but it kept my attention the entire time.
Yeah.
There was nothing that came off as, oh, that's hokey. And I'm not an actor, so I don't know. I can't watch something and say that's good or bad acting. But the whole time it came off real.
Yeah, definitely. And so the story continues where basically, he wakes up the next morning with the presents. It's really interesting because they show him the days before, shaking the presents like we did as kids. Do kids even do that anymore? Do your kids do that?
Yeah, they do.
Okay. Well, you're traditional, so I'm just joking.
When in your opinion did kids stop shaking presents?
Well, it just seems like everything now is gift cards and video game stuff, and well, my biggest Christmas
maybe at a certain age.
At a certain age, that's true. Well, see, like the biggest Christmas present I ever got, well, the one that really, really is like the highlight, was I really, 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 really wanted a Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. And my mom what she would do is, one of the things we did in our family, they would try to pack presents where you could not figure out what was in there. So sometimes they would pack blankets in, like this huge box, and she packed blankets in it and all these other items so that you wouldn't know, you couldn't shake it, or you couldn't figure out what was in there.
Yes. Okay.
And so I couldn't tell if the Millennium Falcon was in there or not. I mean, because you're just trying to figure out, and the box was like a certain size, and there's other things going on. And when I opened that thing up, man, there was that Millennium Falcon. It was probably one of the most exciting presents I ever got.
Yeah. That's pretty clever of your mom to do that.
Yeah. I think it's something that they did in the family, was that, like, you would try to deliberately pack the packages so you couldn't tell what it was. So your imagination had to really work on over.
Yeah. That's see, I don't remember ever being like a kid who was trying to figure out what I got, like was trying to sneak and see.
I didn't want to sneak.
I never did that. I don't know that I was much of a present shaker either. I think so. I don't know if they did this when you went to school, but they had a thing at the Catholic school I went to where your parents would give you some money in an envelope and you get to use it at Santa's secret shop in the school. Mm-hmm. So basically there was a day where the students got to go to this little shop and just little tchotchkes, as they're called. And I do remember those were allowed to be under the tree as soon as we got them home and wrapped them. So those would be gifts from the kids to our parents, to our brothers. And those would get shaken quite a bit, I remember. And they're usually little, so you can kind of tell what they were. But for the big ones, those stayed out of sight until the big morning.
Got it. Yeah. No, I would never try to sneak and try to see, like, go under my parents' bed. I didn't want to know. It had to be wrapped. And then that was part of the excitement, was trying to figure out what was in the present. And so my mom did a really good job with that. So this is a nice trip down memory lane, isn't it?
Tell her I said congratulations on fooling you with
good.
That Millennium Falcon. As soon as you're done with this, let her know.
Okay, I will. So, just the thing about this film is that, like we go back to, so there's the story. I mean, look at just the conversation we just had. It was nostalgic, it was reminiscent, and that's really the sense. That's what the first 2/3 of this film evokes. It's just all the build up, and then Christmas morning, opening the presents, and then having people over for Christmas.
Yeah.
By the way, they had some beautiful Christmas music, just some nice music in this as well. I thought the person who was singing at the piano when he was at the fireplace, kind of, reminiscing, and also kind of being a little depressed, knowing that it was all coming to an end.
That stuck out to me as well. That whole feeling of how and it doesn't set in the day after Christmas. It sets in on Christmas.
Yep.
Where you're sitting there and you're like, yeah, well, this is okay. This was it for the year. This is it.
It's winding down, man.
Yeah. And I actually, years ago, probably about almost 20 years ago, I wrote a song about that sort of melancholy. Like, I thought, there's not a Christmas song about that. So I actually. What's
the name of it?
It's actually the day after, but it's called December 26th.
December 26th.
And it ended up being instrumental because I just, when you're, especially if you're nobody and you're writing, I'm going to write a Christmas song. You can't do lyrics. It's not, it comes off goofy every time. So it's an instrumental. Yeah.
I got it. Oh,
but that stuck out to me because I had those, I'd had those thoughts as a kid and it had come back to me a little bit there.
Interesting. So, as we were talking, as this story is unfolding, of course, why don't you do that music again?
I got to try to find this chord here.
As the story is unfolding, I'm going to talk while you're looking for it.
Okay, I'm ready.
There's so at the moment.
Really stretching here. No,
okay. All right, do the music. Yeah. Okay. So it keeps on going back to that. And you see this girl who's playing, what is this, a French horn that she had? What kind of horn?
I believe that's a French horn, yeah.
So you see this girl with her hair is done in kind of like a traditional, like Heidi look, and the French horn. And it's just an image of this girl that they're keep on referencing, where basically he's talking about how great Christmas is and how wonderful it was, except, and this is something that it's kind of, you could tell I believe this story seems to me to be autobiographical. I think this is based on a true story. And so this gentleman, you can tell, was living with us his whole life.
Yeah.
Maybe just talk a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. And I was just going to say that it's really a great bit of subtle foreshadowing, because if you're watching it the first time, you see this girl with the horn, you don't know that it necessarily is significant. It's just all of a sudden he says, and I remember other things. And then that's the wrong chord. So. But I couldn't find the transcription for the episode. No, just kidding. You hear that every once in a while, and you see this girl with the horn. And at least to me, watching it the first time, it didn't occur to me that girl was significant. I just thought it was like, okay, more like there's something happening here. And there's like maybe a band concert that he's thinking of. But, it keeps focusing on this same girl with the horn. And then it gets to the part that like really, really like made me think and really kind of got to the core of me while watching it was now this girl, German immigrant in the story, and like poor family, and didn't really have friends. So, but a really kind girl, because there was a little tidbit that he added that there was a kid crying on the playground one time, and she went over and was consoling this kid.
So that's what they called
her Consolation, was the sort of mocking nickname that they gave her. And so they're at the recital in the evening at the school. And she's playing, I believe it's "Oh Holy Night," if I remember correctly. There's a piano accompanying her, and she's playing it on the horn, and she's doing fine at first. And then you see the main character this is 5 years later. 5 years. A different
Christmas, like 5 or 6 years later.
Yeah, this is when I believe there's a line in there about something he and his friends were struggling to display their maturity to the world, or something along those lines. And so they're goofballs, they're young boys. They're together, in
a pack,
and they're at school, but it's nighttime and they can kind of roam around, so they're feeling, they're a little bit rambunctious. Yep. They start really teasing this girl from the front row. She sees it. She's playing it fine up until that point. You can see just on her face, she's just like, oh no, like it really got to her. And she starts playing the wrong notes. Some of the notes aren't really coming out at all. And eventually she stops, and she's sitting on the stage, like with her head down sort of, and the piano accompaniment stops. And it's just kind of like, okay, what happened? And then at the very end, the boy's walking out. I probably didn't think much of it. Just thought, whatever. We were just having fun. Sees this girl, Consolation, being consoled by her father. And she's just
it was the mom that was crying.
Oh, it was the mother that was crying. Yes. Okay. That's right. So the last time they show Consolation was she's sitting on the stage and she's just like defeated, basically. That's right. It was the mother, and the father's consoling her, and the boy's watching. And you could tell that this is the moment where he's absorbing what he's now feeling as an adult. He's seeing this, but then you kind of see he just runs off, kind of like a kid would do, But the fact that stuck with him, that you could tell that's the moment right there where if he hadn't seen this girl's mother and father being like devastated by the embarrassment, and just probably it's compounded all the things that they probably had been through since maybe their entire lives, since moving to this country, and the treatment that they had received from some people.
Well, and this would have been the time where these were German immigrants around World War II, maybe pre or post, right around it could have been going on. So there would have been a lot of anti-Germanic hatred as well.
Yeah. And it really took it from, it separated itself, in my opinion, from almost that I can think of, at least every other Christmas movie, television show, whatever, because there's always that happy, cliched happy ending, that feel good ending. This did not have that. This is a very, you had all that stuff in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it ends on the conflict.
Yeah.
It doesn't resolve. So I found that to be very interesting, the way that it was set up, that it's not like, they don't make it sound like he's going to be able to find this girl now as an adult and apologize to her.
And you could tell that was the lament of the narrator. He didn't even know her name.
No, because
you're out there. I wonder how you are. So you'll carry this baggage. So this, and really, you probably figure that the character, the narrator, perhaps the author, every Christmas carries this.
Yeah. And how interesting it is that all that pleasant nostalgia actually reminds him of this. There's like a knot in his stomach. Like he's thinking of all these great things, but then there's that little sharp sort of unpleasant feeling that he's getting. That's actually being brought on by all this wonderful nostalgia. So it's, in a way, you have things like The Christmas Story or practically any other Christmas movie where it's just everybody's happy. George Bailey's holding his daughter and the bell rings and all this kind of stuff. But in this one, it doesn't give you that satisfaction. It's something that, in my opinion, you watch this and you reflect for a while afterwards. You think about, like, man, I hope I hadn't done anything, because it's not something that it wasn't a criminal act. It wasn't anything, it wasn't a major thing. But as an adult looking back, he really realizes how reprehensible it was.
And it makes you think too, because if he hadn't seen Mom crying, he would have never known the devastation that he brought to that family, and he would have never carried that burden. And so it gives us all pause for reflection too. Did we do things in our past, whether as child or adults, where we really hurt somebody and didn't realize it? And we didn't see the consequences, but that person has to carry that burden that we may have put on them.
Yeah. And we were maybe not, it wouldn't have been, it's not pleasant to think about, but maybe we were not afforded the opportunity to see the reaction. Perhaps that was all in private, and we'll never know if we hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you. I'm sure you were a little rambunctious individual as a youth. I mean, you still are. So I would, when you're a kid, even when you're an adult, I say dumb things all the time. And then I go home and I think, why did I say that, to this person? Like, I hope they brushed it off like they look like they did. And most of the time, just like in this story, you're having fun. It's humorous to you, but then you don't really realize what it can do. And that, to me, actually makes this a more authentic actual Christmas sort of a story, because it's that longing for atonement. It's that longing for being forgiven and being able to apologize for something, which is what Christmas is. So it actually, it's a short story. At first view, it's like, wow, that was weird. That was kind of hard to watch. That was weird. But the more and more I thought about it, I thought, wow, I don't know how profound the author meant for it to be, but it was profound to me. It really was. Because I think, like most people, we'll think back to like when we were kids and like, man, I hope I didn't do that to anybody. And you don't know. Sometimes you do know and you feel bad. Sometimes you don't even know. And it kind of freaks me out thinking about that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess, folks, too, is that's where we have to put it in his hands, the things that are out of our hands, and allow the healing and the forgiveness to be done via that way as well. I mean, hey, if there's anybody out there that I've offended and you're watching this, like you raised your hand.
I've got some grievances to air out here.
Yeah, people don't realize, I'm in many ways a very different person than I used to be. People think that I'm this. No, I'm not.
That's not true. No, you're but that's a compliment because I wouldn't say you've improved much, but you didn't need to improve.
Oh, wow, dude, it's coming. That's high praise. Wow. I mean, you people have to understand. I mean,
this is water too, by the way. So just as long as I don't want the listeners thinking that this is doing the talking here.
So, well, Nick, I really want to just thank you so much for coming on. We're longtime friends. I had the privilege of going on their podcast. I also want to tell the audience that Nick and I have what we could call an irregular podcast called Steve and Nick Talk With You About dot, dot, dot. Maybe talk briefly about the concept of our podcast that we've released one episode, and we hope to start releasing some more next year.
We did a pilot episode, and we have a basic concept, I'd say, worked out. It's loosely affiliated, or at least we'll be discussing the Adult Swim show, Joe Pera Talks With You. And which Steve and I hadn't been in communication for a little while. And then when we got back in communication, you had seen, I don't know if it was something on my YouTube channel or that I subscribed to Joe Pera, or it was something like that. And you said, "Oh, you're a Joe Pera fan too." I'm like, "Oh yeah." So that was something.
When we were out of touch, I was watching it and said, "Nick is watching this," or "Nick is watching this."
Yeah, it's a very interesting, very, very good show. Very different, very refreshing show.
Yeah.
So we weren't going to base everything off of it. We're not doing like I believe Talking Dead is the television show like Chris Hardwick does, where Walking Dead's on, Talking Dead is on right afterwards. Exactly. They just talk about it. But I think like the tone of it and some of the topics of conversation, we were going to maybe be inspired by it, I think would be a better way to say it.
Yeah. It would be part of the ethos of the show in some sense.
Yeah. So it would be, if people are enjoying our banter back and forth here, it would basically be that.
Yeah. So Steven to talk with you about, and that is available on all the different platforms. I'm going to provide a link to that. We just have our pilot episode. Originally, we thought we were going to do like a after show Joe Pera's 9 episodes already aired. We hadn't done a single one. So we'll be integrating that show. And of course, most of you probably have no idea what we're talking about. That's fine. We love the show. And if you have never heard of Joe Pera Talks With You on Adult Swim, it's also available on HBO Max, all the seasons. I would recommend that you check it out because it's actually one of the best shows ever made on television, honestly. It's so unique. It's a beautiful show. And so we want to share this with you. So folks, this episode was a little different than most of my Mormon book reviews. I do an occasional different thing, but this is my show, right? So I get to do these kind of things and have these conversations. And Nick, I just want to thank you so much for coming on my program. And I just wondering, do you have any parting words for my audience?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. And on behalf of your audience, thank you for putting out some great content this past year. I know you're very proud of it, and you should be. And just thank you. And hello to the listeners.
Yeah. So meet my friend Nick Jones.
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And, I want to say, just to thank you for being my friend. Thank you for the good times that we've had, and thanks for putting up with me. And
thanks for the ride from the airport.
Yes, I picked him up. That's another story. If you're ever interested, we could talk. Well, it is on the podcast. You know what? Nick and I maybe could even talk about it on one of our programs too. But basically, I just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Every day I get an email or a phone call or a text or something on Facebook Messenger. I talk to people all across the world. I talked to somebody in the Philippines today. I talked to two Europeans last week. They're coming on my program. And it's a real blessing and a privilege to do what I'm doing with this channel. So I just want to thank everyone. I want to wish every one of you a Merry Christmas. And we're going to get through this pandemic together. I just want to remind my audience to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the notification button for when a new video comes out. Everybody, we're going to get through this. Have a Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. So after the new year, the book reviews will start coming out. And so we're very excited about that. And we'll see you soon.